Sam didn't intend to go inside. He was just trying to get out of the rain. The sky had opened up without warning, a hot, sticky summer storm that soaked through his jacket in seconds. He had planned to cut through the parking lot behind the old Meadowbrook Plaza and take the footpath home. But the footpath was now a stream, the rain hammering down like nails. The mall's front doors loomed nearby, still standing despite the rumors that it was closed for good. Everyone assumed it had shut down years ago. Most stores had moved out, and the handful that remained kept odd hours. Sam hadn't been inside since he was a teenager. He remembered wandering through with friends, wasting time, watching the place slowly die. It had always felt off, too big, too empty, even back then. He darted through the puddles and pulled open the heavy glass door. It groaned like it hadn't been used in weeks. He stepped inside, brushing rain from his sleeves. The air hit him immediately, stale, cold, slightly metallic, the kind of air-conditioned chill that belongs to forgotten places. The echo of his footsteps filled the space. The man was still there, still itself. But something felt wrong almost immediately. The lights buzzed faintly overhead, half of them flickered. The familiar corridors stretched out in all directions, but there were no people. No sounds of cash registers or chatter, just a low, endless hum. Sam turned to look behind him. The doors were gone. There was no exit, just a seamless wall of pale green tile, as if the door had never existed. He blinked, confused. Took a step back and touched it. Solid, cold. He walked to the side, searching for a seam, a handle, anything. His pulse quickened. He tried to laugh it off. Maybe he had entered from the side and gotten turned around. Maybe there was another door and he just wasn't seeing it. He turned and walked further into the mall, shoes squeaking faintly against the aging tile. Every footstep echoed louder than the last. He passed a directory map and stopped to look at it. The stores were still labeled, but the names were strange. Sears Clothing, All Days, Food Shoes. Some were even less coherent. Echo, Shelf Body, Soft World. None had logos he recognized. The map was useless, a looping figure 8 drawn over and over in red pen, and beneath it, instead of "You are here," the words simply read, "Air you." He stepped away quickly. He passed store after store. Most were gated shut, but some displays were still intact. Mannequins stood in rows, dressed in outdated fashion. Some had missing arms or no heads. Others wore clothes that made no sense. Long hospital gowns, veils, ponchos made of plastic wrap. One mannequin stood alone in a dark boutique, wearing a child's yellow raincoat, its hand pressed against the glass as if waving goodbye. As he kept moving, Sam realized the layout had changed. The corridors didn't match his memory. He turned left where he should have been able to head toward the food court, but instead found himself in a narrow hallway carpeted in maroon. The air smelled like damp paper and floor wax. There were no more store signs, just doorways that led to nowhere. Some held rows of chairs, all bolted to the floor. Others opened into pitch black. A few had mirrors. Large department store mirrors hung too low, as if for children or something shorter than human. He turned around, trying to go back. The hallway he'd come from was no longer there, just another stretch of empty storefronts. His mouth went dry. He called out hello, but his voice sounded flat, like the space itself was swallowing it. No echo, no response. He checked his phone, still 4:23 p.m., but it had said that 10 minutes ago, and it now read no service. The clock flickered, briefly switching to 4:24, then back to 4:23, over and over. Something was wrong, deeply fundamentally wrong. He tried to focus. If he could just find the food court, he'd been near the south entrance. That was always the busiest part of the mall. He began walking faster. He passed kiosks that sold strange items. Taxidermied birds, dissembled watches, dream catchers made from cassette tape. One kiosk displayed sunglasses, all with the lenses facing inward. He didn't stop to look closely. Eventually he found the food court, but it wasn't the one he remembered. It was clean, too clean. tables perfectly aligned, not a speck of dust. The restaurant fronts were all open, but there were no workers, no smell, no trash. Digital menu screens blinked with nonsense. Pizza by sadness, fry worked in 88, hamburger flavors. One screen flashed only the word eat. He stepped toward a drink machine and pressed the button. Nothing happened. The lights above flickered. Somewhere softly he heard laughter. Children, but not real laughter. Not spontaneous or human, just a sound loop. 3 short laughs, then silence, then 3 more. Always exactly the same. Sam backed away. He started leaving marks, turning over chairs, stacking cups, drawing arrows on the tile using a lip balm he'd found in a purse. But when he circled back, the chairs were upright, the cups gone, his arrows smeared. In one hallway he found writing on the wall in smudged red marker. "Don't trust your reflection." He stared at it for a long time. Then he saw the mirror. It hadn't been there a moment ago. A full-body mirror hung between 2 broken vending machines. He stepped in front of it slowly. His reflection stared back. But it wasn't quite right. His face was pale, slack. His eyes seemed wrong, like they belonged to someone else. Behind his reflection, the hallway was darker. Something moved there. A shadow, a flicker. He turned. Nothing. When he looked back, the mirror was cracked, and he wasn't in it anymore. The glass showed only the hallway. Empty. He ran. He tried to scream, but the air felt too thick, his voice catching in his throat. Every corridor turned back on itself. The second-floor escalators moved, but went nowhere. One led directly back to the same floor. Another deposited him in front of a storefront labeled Memory. Inside were dozens of televisions playing static. He stepped closer and saw that one was showing footage of him, walking, in real time. The camera angle was from above. He looked up, but the ceiling was just blackness. He hurled a stool at the TV. The screen didn't even flicker. The mall had rules, but not human ones. He stopped feeling hungry or tired. Time lost meaning. His hair grew longer, his face thinned. He began to forget what day it was, then what year, then his last name. He began avoiding the mirrors entirely. He'd see someone else in them, or sometimes nothing at all. Eventually he stopped running. There was nowhere to go. He wandered in silence. Sometimes he heard faint footsteps that weren't his. Distant doors closing, the escalators groaned like sleeping animals. Once he opened a staff door and found a perfectly preserved bedroom, his childhood bedroom, down to the sheets, the books, the posters. It was wrong, of course. No windows, no doorknob, just a scene. Waiting. He didn't enter. Later, he found a single working elevator in the center of the mall. The display read home. He didn't press it. He just stood in front of it for a long time, staring at his reflection in the brushed metal doors. He no longer looked like Sam. He wasn't sure who he looked like. Eventually the doors slid open, the elevator was empty, waiting. He stepped back and walked away. Now he wanders. The inside. Somewhere beneath the skylights that don't show the sky. Somewhere beyond the walls that seal themselves shut. He doesn't scream anymore. He whispers to the mannequins, hums along with the warped music. Sometimes, when the lights dim, he finds the same looping hallway and walks it endlessly until he forgets he's walking at all. And if you ever find yourself in an old mall that seems too quiet, too still, if the signs don't quite make sense and your footsteps echo too long, be careful. Turn around, leave quickly, because Meadowbrook Plaza isn't closed. It's just waiting, and once it notices you, you're already part of it. The first time it happened, Kale was 8 years old. It was a Saturday, late afternoon, and the sky outside was the color of cold milk. His parents were arguing again. Something about rent. Something about his father drinking. The house always felt smaller when they fought, like the walls pressed in a little. So he did what he usually did. He left. Caleb didn't go far. He rode his bike down to the edge of the subdivision where the cul-de-sacs curled into dead grass and the cracked sidewalk gave up and stopped existing. Beyond that, there was just an old shopping centre, abandoned before he was born, and a stretch of overgrown trees tangled around a broken chain-link fence. That day, he found a new place, a narrow alley between the abandoned Superdollar and a shuttered bank. He didn't remember it being there before. The alley was unusually long, a smooth stretch of concrete between two brick walls, cast in shadow even though the sun was still up. He could see light at the far end, a glimmer of something metallic. So he walked, feeling and clearer voice. The noise of traffic faded behind him. The air grew cooler, still. When he reached the end of the alley, he came out into a hallway. Not outside, not behind the buildings, just a hallway. Dim carpet underfoot, soft fluorescent lights buzzing above, beige walls. It looked like a hotel corridor, but older. The pattern on the carpet reminded him of something from the dentist's office. There were no signs, no windows. Just a long corridor stretching in both directions, lined with numbered doors that didn't follow any order. He turned around. He himself, the alley was gone. At first he thought it was some kind of trick. Maybe the buildings were connected underground, but no. The air smelled different here. Stale, filtered, like the inside of a vacuum cleaner. And the silence. It wasn't just quiet. It was watching. He walked for what felt like 20 minutes. The corridor bent slightly every 100 feet, curving left then right. He passed doors with no handles. A drinking fountain that ran but never stopped. A payphone mounted crooked on the wall, the receiver gone. Cord hanging like a limp arm. Eventually, Caleb found a stairwell. He went down one flight, then another. The walls got darker, the lights less reliable. At the bottom, he found a small glass door marked Recreation Center in faded letters. He pushed it open. Inside was an indoor pool. No water, just an empty, echoing rectangle of cracked blue tile. The room was lit by a single flickering light overhead and lined with pale yellow benches, all facing the pool. A small lifeguard tower stood at one end, draped with a red towel that fluttered even though there was no wind. He stood there for a long time, just listening. He heard something, not a voice, not exactly, more like a breath. And then silence again. He turned and ran. When Caleb stumbled out of the alley hours later, the sky was dark. His bike was still where he'd left it, leaned up against the rusted bike rack outside the Superdollar. He didn't tell anyone what happened, not because he was scared, but because he wasn't sure he could explain it. Even at 8, he understood that what he saw wasn't supposed to be real. It didn't happen again for a while, but something had changed in him. He started noticing places that didn't quite fit. Like the empty office floor above his mum's work where the carpet was still vacuumed every day even though no one used it, or the underpass near the bus stop that always echoed more than it should no matter how quiet it was. And sometimes he'd test them, wander a little too far into the wrong hallway at school, step through a fence behind the library. Once he crawled into a tunnel at the playground that felt far longer than it should have been, and when he came out, the shadows had shifted and the air smelled like burned plastic. Each time he left a little more quietly. He didn't talk about it. He just disappeared for a while. By the time he was 11, it was happening regularly. He'd step into the school bathroom and the windows would be bricked over, the stalls too tall, the lights buzzing just a little too loud. He could always find his way out eventually, but it was getting harder. The exits kept changing. He started carrying a flashlight, a granola bar, a small notepad with maps of places he couldn't find on Google Earth. One time he came home after one of his trips to find his parents sitting stone-faced on the couch. They asked where he'd been. He said, "Just riding my bike." They didn't believe him, but they didn't push either. He noticed they looked different, paler, stiffer, like they'd been waiting too long. By 16, he was a ghost, still attending school, still breathing, but only barely. His eyes always looked just past people, his notebooks filled with door patterns and descriptions of ceiling texture. Sometimes he'd blink during algebra class and find himself alone in a gymnasium filled with fog, or step into the band room and hear nothing but the hum of refrigeration. And sometimes he didn't come back for days. At 18, he disappeared for good. His bed was made, notebook missing, flashlight gone. No struggle, no note, just silence. His parents searched. The police shrugged. No one believed anything bad had happened. Not really. Just another lost kid. But Isaac, Caleb's older brother, didn't believe that, because he found the notebook. It was hidden under Caleb's bed in a crumpled grocery bag. The pages were packed with narrow handwriting, dates, drawings, maps, locations, doorways, notes scrawled in red and blue and pencil. Hallway never ends. Time stops in the dentist room. Green carpet equals danger. Elevators lie. He read every page. And the next day, Isaac went to the alley behind the Super Dollar and walked in. At first it was just like Caleb described. That familiar wrong light, that too clean carpet, those endless halls. He wandered for hours, called for Caleb, found no one. But every now and then he found signs. A granola wrapper with C scratched into it. A drawing of two stick figures, one big, one small, holding hands. And on the wall, written in crayon, "You're close." That was 2 years ago. Isaac has never stopped searching. Sometimes he comes back. Sometimes he wakes up in his apartment with dust in his hair and red carpet fibers stuck to his shoes. But sometimes he disappears for weeks. He's been through a parking garage that echoes before you move, a school hallway filled with lockers that won't open, a grocery store that sells only empty boxes, a library where every book is blank except one that read "I'm still here." He's heard Caleb's voice, once from behind a mirrored wall, once on a walkie-talkie that wasn't plugged in, and once in a hotel lobby with no ceiling where the receptionist had Caleb's eyes, but not his voice. Isaac is changing. He doesn't age right anymore. His memory slips, his reflection wavers. Sometimes he thinks he's seen Caleb, older now, thinner, pale, standing at the far end of a hallway. But every time he runs toward him, the door closes. Still, Isaac searches. Because if Khaled is alive, if he's out there, somewhere in the fog, or the hum, or the carpeted spaces between, then he's not going to stop. Not until he finds him, or until the spaces take him to. And if you ever see a boy staring into a maintenance hallway for too long, or a man in a deserted office building opening every door like he's expecting something, leave him be. He's not looking for you, he's looking for a way back, or for someone who may no longer want to return. Because sometimes if you wander too far, you don't just get lost, you leave, and you don't always come back. Jason was 26 when he found the place. He was on the road, driving west, toward nowhere in particular. Just out of a long relationship, fresh off a job he hated, and clinging to the hope that a change of scenery would be enough to quiet whatever had begun humming inside his brain. His phone was off. His gas tank was low. The sun was setting in one of those featureless Midwestern skies that made it impossible to tell east from west. He pulled off the highway at a nameless exit. No green signs, no restaurants. Just a gas station with a flickering canopy light and an old vending machine out front. The place didn't even have a name, just food and fuel in cracked red letters. He went in for beef jerky and water, came out with something entirely different. The inside of the gas station was ordinary enough. A humming cooler of drinks, dusty snack racks, a tired guy behind the counter watching a small TV that was playing Cops. Jason grabbed his stuff, paid in cash, and asked where the bathroom was. The guy just pointed behind him without looking up. Jason turned, expecting a small door labeled restroom or something handwritten on paper. Instead, he saw a red plastic tunnel entrance, bright red, circular, padded around the edges, the kind of tunnel entrance you'd see on an indoor jungle gym in a McDonald's circa 1999. It was lit from within, glowing softly. Jason stared at it for a long time, one hand still holding his water bottle. It made no sense. There was no reason for this thing to be here. It was too big, too pristine, like someone had cut and pasted a piece of his childhood into the back of a gas station without asking permission. He looked back toward the counter. The guy hadn't moved. Jason turned back toward the tunnel and climbed in. The sound changed immediately, from the low, distant hum of coolers and fluorescent lights to something softer, like the padded quiet of a child's play center after hours. The tunnel curved to the right, lined with red and yellow foam panels. The floor was soft beneath his knees. The scent was instant and overwhelming, a perfect mix of plastic, rubber, old socks, and hand sanitizer. It triggered something deep in him, a memory, not of one place, but dozens, play places from birthday parties, road trips, small food courts, daycare centers, childhood flashes mashed together. He expected the tunnel to dead end within a few feet. It didn't. It opened up into a chamber, a wide circular room with mesh windows on 3 sides and a trampoline floor. The kind of padded hexagon kids used to bounce in, slap each other around in, scream until they got juice boxes. There were no kids now, no noise. Just the faint creaking of the plastic structure beneath his weight. Jason stood up, legs unsteady. The mesh windows looked out into more tunnels, blue ones twisting off into the distance. He laughed, unsure why, then crawled forward again. The play place never ended. Room after room, tunnel after tunnel, every color imaginable. Tunnels with transparent walls, ones that spun in lazy spirals. Crawl spaces that narrowed so tightly he had to lie flat and inch forward with his elbows. Others so wide they felt like ballrooms. There were slides, hundreds of them. Twisting, spiraling slides. Wavy ones that bumped every few feet. One slide dumped him into a ball pit the size of a swimming pool, filled with faded plastic balls, their colors dull and sun-bleached. Some were crushed, some were sticky, all were familiar. He floated there for a while, staring up at the fluorescent ceiling light buzzing overhead, a single dead moth stuck inside the plastic cover. He didn't want to leave. There was something soothing about it all, not just nostalgic, specific. Everything in here matched the texture of memory. A Velcro strap on a foam bridge pulled loose like the one from a Burger King near his grandma's house. The floor tiles in one padded hallway were the exact pattern of the early childhood center where he went before kindergarten. He turned a corner and found a narrow alcove with a plastic payphone bolted into the wall. bright green, the kind that used to sit in birthday party rooms just for show. It rang once. Jason didn't take it up. It didn't ring again. He passed through a cargo net tunnel that stretched across an indoor canyon of painted fake rock walls. A room full of foam cylinders dangling from the ceiling like jellyfish. A bounce pad that reacted with delay, launching him upward a full second after he jumped. A spiral staircase where each step lit up a different cartoon animal as he climbed. Sometimes he found windows, large bubble domes, the kind you could sit in and stare out of as a kid, feeling like a tiny king watching his plastic kingdom. Only now, the view outside was endless tunnels, curving upwards and downwards, some upside down, one was vertical with gravity-defying foam steps. There was no sky, no outside world, only more maze. He started seeing odd things. A birthday banner strung across a hallway. Happy 7th, Jason. A vending machine filled with slushy cups that were all half full and lukewarm. A slide entrance with a sign, exit this way if you remember how. He went down the slide. It ended in a foam pit shaped like a giant smiling face. He climbed out the nose. He never saw anyone else. No kids, no adults, no staff. But the place was clean, maintained. Party rooms were set, tables lined with unopened goodie bags, plates of untouched cake, and name cards written in marker, Madison, Connor, Jason. He walked past a mural of cartoon sea creatures holding balloons. A jellyfish wore a hat and held a sign. The fun never ends. And he believed it. Time dissolved. He didn't know how long he'd been in there. Hours? Days? There was no hunger, no thirst, no fatigue. His skin didn't itch. His knees never hurt. He didn't sweat. He started calling it the maze in his head. Capital letters, a proper name for a proper place. He saw more strange things. A claw machine filled with tiny TVs all playing home movies he didn't recognize. A nap room with 30 cots, each one labeled with names from his 3rd grade class. A tunnel that looped back to itself infinitely until he crawled with his eyes closed and came out somewhere new. Once he found a large glass door. It was locked. Behind it was a parking lot, or something that resembled one. Yellow lines stretched out too far. A carousel in the distance spun without music. He watched it until he forgot why he came. Eventually he found a wooden door. Not plastic, not padded, just a real wooden door. Carved into it was a crude drawing, stick figures holding hands. He opened and stepped out into the gas station again. The TV still played Cops. The man behind the counter didn't look up. Jason stumbled outside. It was morning, the sun rising over the horizon like it had never moved. His car was still there, his snacks still in the passenger seat. He drove 10 miles before pulling over and crying into the steering wheel. Not out of fear, but because he missed it already. He went back. Of course he did. But the tunnel was gone. It's the blank wall behind the employee's only door. No red plastic. No mains. It's just mops and a utility sink. That was 3 years ago. Jason lives a normal life now. Mostly. But he still checks every time he stops somewhere new. He pushes on weird doors, peers behind janitor closets, checks the back of arcades. Sometimes he thinks he hears that old familiar buzzing of fluorescent lights, or smells the plasticky scent of hand sanitizer and apple juice. He waits for it, because he knows it's still out there. And next time, he might not come back. Not because he's trapped, but because he won't want to. nobody ever talked about the 6th floor. At Langard Resources there were rumours, sure, offhand jokes about the missing floor or don't fall into the back rooms, usually told over bad coffee or during awkward elevator rides. But the official building directory skipped from 5 to 7 without explanation. Even the elevators seemed to follow suit. The panel inside each car jumped straight from floor 5 to 7, as though the 6th had never existed. If anyone asked, they were told it was closed for asbestos or storage or under renovation. Owen didn't think much of it until the day the elevators were out of service. He was already late, juggling a thermos of coffee and a handful of reports, when he ducked into the south stairwell. The lights in the stairwell buzzed overhead, casting dim orange glows over concrete steps. He counted floors as he climbed. 2, 3, 4, 5, then stopped. A door stood there, unlike the others, its paint dull and metallic, the placard beside it mismatched and worn, the label read 6B, that didn't match the floor plan. Curiosity nudged him. This wasn't like the others. The doorknob was older than the rest, a cold brass handle that clicked as he touched it. No keycard reader, no security lock, just a plain, unassuming door. He turned the knob and pushed it open. The first thing he noticed was the air. It was cold. Not refreshingly cold, but sterile, lifeless. The kind of cold you'd expect inside an unplugged freezer. It didn't rush out toward him. It pressed against him. The scent hit next. Dust, dry carpet, old glue, and a faint hint of something like powdered coffee creamer. The hallway ahead was wide. Wider than it should have been. Standard beige carpeting stretched forward, its tightly looped fibers pristine but faded. The walls were lined with cubicles, each with waist-high partitions upholstered in an old seafoam-colored fabric. The fluorescent lights above flickered intermittently, humming a high tone that never fully settled into silence. It looked normal at first. Owen stepped inside and let the door close behind him. The latch clicked gently. He expected to see clutter, a forgotten stack of chairs, broken equipment, boxes labeled archive, but instead the place was clean. Too clean. Unused, but not abandoned. Each cubicle was identical. Desk, chair, lamp, filing cabinet, trash bin, all placed with exacting symmetry. The air didn't move. He walked slowly. Each cubicle he passed was staged like a set. Papers stacked perfectly, pens in straight lines, some had desktop computers, bulky CRT monitors all turned off. One had a mug with the words, "World's Okayest" MPM printed in fading blue. There was dust on everything but no fingerprints, nothing to suggest recent use. The deeper he went, the more he noticed how strange the layout felt. The corridor never ended. It stretched and stretched, turning gently left, then right, as if winding in a slow spiral. The building wasn't big enough for this much space. He paused at the cubicle. A yellow notepad sat neatly in the center of the desk. Nothing written on it except one phrase, over and over in identical handwriting. Apitat. Continue. He backed away. When he turned around, the door was gone. Not just closed, gone. Replaced by another cubicle wall. His throat tightened. He called out, "Hello." His voice sounded wrong in the space. There was no echo, no bounce, as if the sound was being absorbed by the air itself. He tried again, louder. Nothing. No reply. He pressed onward. A break room appeared ahead. A kitchenette tucked between cubicles. Its floor was a sickly green linoleum. Cabinets overhead, chipped and beige. A dusty fridge buzzed faintly in the corner, accompanied by an old microwave with a dial instead of buttons. There was a whiteboard on the wall with dry erase markers attached by strings. A motivational phrase had been written and half erased so many times it was unreadable, a ghost of corporate enthusiasm smeared beyond recognition. A single donut box sat on the counter, sealed shut. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single donut. No bite marks, no mold, just perfectly frosted and untouched. A sticky note was stuck to the inside of the lid. It read, "Owen." He closed the box without touching it. From that point on, things began to change. The hallway widened again, the ceiling grew taller, the fluorescent lights began spacing out, creating zones of dimmer light and awkward shadow. The air began to feel heavier, as if saturated with static. He passed more cubicles. One desk had no computer, just a pile of paper clips arranged in a perfect circle. Another had a monitor displaying a black screen with a blinking cursor. Not a blinking line, but a blinking eye, open and closed, open and closed. A large conference room appeared to his left, walls made of frosted glass. Inside, the long wooden table was flanked by dozens of chairs, all pulled out at the exact same angle. There was no projector, no whiteboard, only a screensaver bouncing across a TV in the corner, a bright red word slowly drifting from corner to corner. Observe. He didn't go in. The air vents rattled faintly above. A printer somewhere in the distance whirred to life, spat out one page and fell silent. Owen turned a corner and saw a hallway of mirrors. They were mismatched, some tall, some narrow, some warped, propped against the walls or nailed into the dry wall at uneven heights. His reflection repeated endlessly, too many versions of himself stretching into the distance. But some were wrong. One version blinked out of sync. Another smiled, while he didn't. A third stood still as he walked. He stepped away quickly. Time fell apart. His phone battery died. His watch spun wildly. 10:12, 4:03, 11:50, 10:12 again. The break rooms began to repeat. Each one subtly different. One had a working coffee machine that poured nothing into the cup. Another had a fridge filled with dozens of the same Tupperware container, each labeled lunch. He opened one. It contained a set of teeth. He found a door once, a glass office with a name etched into the door. Unkalman, Associate Director. His own name. He opened it. The room inside was not an office. It was his bedroom from age 12, wallpapered with comic book pages, twin mattress, the old lava lamp that had broken when he was 15. He stepped back, hands shaking. When he blinked, the room was gone. Just another copy room now, filled with toner cartridges and unused fax machines. At some point, Owen forgot why he'd come. He stopped looking for the exit. He stopped calling for help. The office changed to accommodate him. Desks became longer, cubicles turned into full rooms, clocks disappeared, hallways twisted in impossible ways, sharp angles that led nowhere. A stairwell appeared, once, on the left, marked exit, but inside it led only up, one landing, then another, then another. After 20 flights, he stepped out into another row of cubicles. He screamed. No one answered. Now Owen walks floor 6B like part of its design. Sometimes he finds new rooms, a copy center filled with mirrors, a janitor closet with a sleeping bag and dozens of empty water bottles, a break room where he sits and pretends for an hour or two that it's a normal day. Sometimes he hears the elevator ding in the distance, but it never comes. And sometimes in Longard Resources, people hear the sound of typing in an empty room. They find post-it notes with no meaning. Follow through, almost done, clock in soon. Nobody talks about 6B, but it's still there, waiting, rowing, becoming. So if you find yourself in an old office building late at night and you come across a door marked 6B, don't open it. Not because it's dangerous, but because once it sees you, your luck start to belong.